Hello and welcome to today's Rainwater Research Live. So it's again our Tuesday live sessions. It's a bit later than normal. Usually they are at 10 o'clock, I believe, 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Is usual ones, but we're having to go live at 11:30 today because this morning we were in the video room, the video studio here at Graph for Stormwater CPD. So we had to bring it back a bit just to meet the timeframes, but nevertheless, we will never miss a rainwater or a Tuesday live session, and we'll certainly never miss your favorite subject, which is rainwater harvesting. So we're back again with a rainwater research, and I'm joined by David. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Good. How was your weekend?
Yeah, can't complain. It was absolutely glorious weather.
It was wonderful
It's
weather.
a bit of a shame now. It's a bit grey and gloomy now, but typical British weather.
Get up to anything on Mother's Day?
Not out of the ordinary. I went out for dinner. So just standard stuff. Got the flowers and the card for the mother. So she was relatively pleased. Got to see her for a bit in the time of the afternoon. But yeah, very enjoyable weekend. Thank you. How about yourself?
Very good. Went up to see my mother. I was there actually on the Saturday, helping my dad in the garden, and that's affected my allergies because I'm a bit sniffly now, and it's not a cold. I've discovered that I am allergic to manual labor, therefore now my allergies are coming through. But then watched the football Saturday night, have some people, met family, and then on Sunday it was another day full of family around my parents' house. And annoyingly, my Mother's Day card arrived yesterday morning. I ordered it last week and it arrived yesterday morning. I was gutted because it was a great one.
You knew what the day was, mate, at the beginning of the year. So
but I had to go to M&S in the morning in order to pick up a replacement. But I was really annoying. I was really annoyed mainly because it was one of these like funny ones. Me and my brother always get one for whoever, and it was congratulations, your children didn't turn out to crackheads. And unfortunately,
I'm sure she's pleased she didn't receive that one.
Oh, my brother was the worst. It was something about well done on raising such a fantastic child. So it's always a bit tongue-in-cheek anyway. But nevertheless, as we move on, we'll start to talk about rainwater harvesting. That is the main reason you're here, not to talk about our choice of cards for Mother's Day. So today's one will all be about how to size a rainwater harvesting system. So when you're at the start of the project, one of the main first questions you're going to have is what size system do I need and what size tank do I need? So now we've got David to talk for us about what we need to consider for when we want to size our rainwater harvesting system. So David, take it away.
Okay, so when we're looking at sizing a rainwater harvesting system, we generally look at two different sizing constraints. The initial one is yield, so how much you can potentially harvest. And when we look at yield, we need to take into consideration the catchment area, as well as the location of where you are in the country or the world. Now, typically speaking, there will be a climate office relatively close to your area, which will have recorded annual figures for how much rainfall you receive, and that's generally measured in millimeters. Now, taking that statistic, you can then multiply that by your catchment area. So you need to find out what the catchment surfaces you're catching off. So that could be a house, or it could be a shed roof, or it could be on more commercial basis. It could be a giant agricultural building or school. Lots of different options for you. So if you can estimate that catchment area, you can multiply it by the annual rainfall figure. That, of course, is going to give you how much rain, number of litres you can get in a full year. We then need to take into consideration some other sizing coefficients. The first one to take into consideration is, I suppose, the catchment coefficient in terms of the surface of the roof. So if you're looking at a flat roof or a slate roof, using tiles, typically speaking, you generally get a yield. So basically, some of that rain, as it hits that roof, will bounce off, and then some of it will basically, just evaporate away. And normally you would get something like 80–90% of that rainwater channeling down those downpipes into the underground tank. If you're looking at potentially like a green roof, for example, so you've got a sedum roof, that plantation, that living plantation on top of that roof will basically use some of that rainwater to help it to live and grow. So in those instances, you may get a bigger reduction coefficient. Typically speaking, you could get up to a 50% reduction, which is quite a considerable reduction if you're trying to capture that water for rainwater harvesting. Moving away from that catchment coefficient, we've also got the efficiency of the filter. Most filters will have either a 95% or 100% catchment, depending on the different type. So if it's a stainless steel self-cleaning filters, which is what we talked about on various other sessions, you generally see like a 95% catchment coefficient. So the water is washing over that top of that filter. And yeah, some of it will discharge down into the tank, and then 5% of it will, to retain that filter's cleanliness, will discharge into the outflow, whether that be a storm network or some other drainage outlet point. With a basket filter, of course, water shining down, hitting that basket, and it's all cascading into the underground tank. So in that case, you get 100%. Now, once you've taken those 4 parameters into consideration, we look at the sizing of the actual tank, so how many days storage you want to achieve. So we've done, of course, taken into consideration an annual rainfall statistic of whatever that might be. It could be anything from 650 up to 1500. But that, of course, is based on a 365-day cycle. And then, of course, if we want to have a certain number of days storage, whether it be 18 as per the British standard, or if you want to basically have a month, or it could be longer, of course, you divide that big number you had through by 365, and then you multiply it by the number of days storage you want to achieve. So that is generally what we'd look at when we talk about sizing a rainwater harvesting tank in terms of yield. Hopefully that's relatively clear for everyone. The other way we look at tank size design is demand. So how much rainwater you potentially need for the requirements you're looking to support. Now, with a typical rainwater harvesting system, which has not got additional layers of filtration on to improve the water quality, so we're just channeling that water through an integrated filter, we look at 50% application of reason use that water back into our mains water consumption. So this would normally, of course, include, again, as we've said previously, outside cleaning, washing machine, and your toilets. Those are the 3 main ones, which works up to about 50% of what an average household would use in terms of its mains water. With, of course, agriculturally, if we're feeding livestock or stuff, that rainfall demand figure is going to exponentiate to be much, much higher. So in which case your tank sizing would be affected by that too. So that's just something to consider. But when we're talking about demand, we need to basically work out how much water, again, we're using on a daily basis. And once we have that number, whether it is 50 litres per person per day on our domestic property, or if it is going to be something like 10,000 litres per day for feeding some livestock through to some sort of cattle troughs, whatever it might be, we know that number. We then compare that demand versus the yield. Sometimes we take into consideration an average of the 2, or maybe we look at installing a tank size which is the smaller of the 2 figures to try and get a more cost-effective solution. So that's generally what we would look at. The more practical way that I prefer to do is to look at taking an average figure of the 2, so then you get both of both situations. So we've always got some rainwater hopefully available for the requirements at hand. So that's generally what we would look at and talk about in terms of system sizing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's very comprehensive overview for not only kind of domestic, but also commercial applications with rainwater. But if you are looking to size a rainwater harvesting system for yourself, you can head over to our website, graphuk.co.uk, and that has a rainwater harvesting sizing system tool that you can use, and it's perfect for domestic applications, and it'll give you what size tank would be best for you and the selection of tanks and packages that we do that'd be best for your projects. But if it comes to a commercial application, like David's saying, whether it's agriculture, hotels, schools, any sort of that nature, then get in contact with us and we'll be able to size that system for you and tell you exactly what you need. So that is the main kind of topic that we've discussed. Now it's time to go over the recent project that we've been working on. Yep. So unfortunately, we haven't got any pictures. We didn't manage to capture some, but we'd like to discuss in more detail about the recent project. David, take it away. What was this project all about?
Okay, so it's a very, very large rainwater harvesting application. Topic of the day. It was installed over at a caravan site down in Somerset. It's called Highbridge. It was a project which we worked on for quite some time. I think it was 5-6 months from when we first got involved to finished completion. Now, quite unusually with this project, we got involved a bit more with the installation, as the development of the site went on. So we're able to really get the best from the system and finalize the system install and commission it going forwards. The project originated with the customer looking at basically catchment not only off a roof area but also some greenfield runoff. So they've got some existing pipelines in place which were channeling under a field and going into a ditch, and they're looking to tap into that to use for this rainwater harvesting system. That was some sizable area, around about 22,000 square meters, so a huge area. And then, of course, we had the roof area on top of that, which was another 2,400. So really was quite a large rainwater harvesting application that we could really tap into and reuse. Because of that, we decided to look and ask the customer what were they intending to use that rainwater for. So kind of referring back to what we've just discussed in terms of sizing system. When we looked at the demand, we found out that they weren't actually going to use as much as they could potentially harvest. And for that reason, we basically sized the system based on their demand. Still a relatively sizable system. It came to the conclusion that we would supply 2 number 52,000 litre tanks supplied in series to get a combined tank volume of 104,000 litres. So really was a very big system. Of course, water off the roof only, because it was only deemed the roof was going to be required to support that tank size. So that made things a bit more straightforward in terms of the pipe connections, the drainage runs into the tank. Also meant that we got the best possible quality of water coming off the roof area, where it was much, much cleaner. So yeah, water channeling down into these tanks. From these tanks, we basically implemented a dual pump system, which was working off a control box and an external kiosk. And that was pumping water up into a balance tank. And this balance tank was only 5,000 litres. So it was one of our platinum tanks. It's another underground tank. But within that platinum tank, of course, we had the top up from this underground tank via a delayed action valve. But we also had a mains water supply. So we're basically using this as a balance tank, loft tank, kind of similar to what we would do with a header tank system, in which, of course, we would primarily use the system based on the rainwater supply. And if the tank ever dropped below or was critically low, we top up with the mains water supply. And with the mains water supply going to this platinum tank, of course, we've only got 5,000 litres of storage versus the 104,000 litres we had underground. So we're able to minimise their potential rainfall top up, or mains water top up, apologies, to this tank. And then from this platinum tank, we're able to directly feed the applications that they desired, which was basically, as it was a caravan park, they were looking to jet wash the caravans down. So there was a cleaning application, and they're also supplying water to their toilet block as well. So yeah, really pleased with the overall system supply in the end. A really good in-depth system to get involved in.
Perfect. I think that's a great project to discuss, because it also had very much the commercial aspect to it, with the large 52,000 litre tanks, and then also the platinum tank in there to use on the separate side of things. So yeah, a really nice project to work on, and from the sounds of it, very good one to look at, and shows the kind of power rainwater harvesting can have on the commercial applications. Because if that caravan park was using the toilet flushing and the jet washing with mains water, that could be a lot of water used in such a short period of time. So it really shows the benefits of collecting rainwater and putting it to wonderful use. So that was the project highlight for this week. And now it's time to answer any questions that have come in. So we have our fabulous assistant behind the desk to show them up as we go along. So the first question we have coming in: what type of filter do I need for my rainwater harvesting system? Okay,
with filters, we generally need to consider what we are intending to use the rainwater first for initially, I think. Typically here at Graph, we would favour using a basket filter if it's going to be a garden system only. With the basket filter, you generally get 100% catchment, as well as, of course, so you get a much better quality of water filtration as well. So we would look at that first. If it's a house system, we would look towards a self-cleaning filter. There's probably a lot more water demand through a house filter supply. So having that self-cleaning capability is quite beneficial. So we would kind of steer in that direction if we could. You may be forced into using a basket filter, which is the preferable solution if we're discharging to into ground via a soakaway, just because we want to retain any leaves and debris which may get washed down those incoming drainage pipes into the tank. We want to keep them in that filter instead of washing them over into the soakaway. So that's what we would look at. In terms of the size of filter, we generally increase the size of the filter due to the pipe diameter, and the pipe diameter is dictated on the catchment area. So that's also something to bear in mind as well. But that's generally what I would encourage people to look at in terms of filters when they're looking at implementing their system.
Perfect. And we have another question come in. What type of backfill do I need when installing the tank?
Okay, backfill is an interesting question. We generally look at 2 different types of backfill. The installation instructions would from Graph normally refer to a P shingle backfill, usually 8 to 16 millimeters. Any sort of non-sharp stone is generally okay. So non-angular stone, generally, which gives you a little bit of compaction ability, so you can make sure there's no voids in and around the tank. Here in the UK, generally, you would see anything from 10 to 20 mil would be acceptable. And when you would use a granular backfill, if you've got very good self-draining soil, the granular backfill course gives you a lot more adaptability and play within the installation window, because you haven't got to allow concrete, which we'll go into talk about, to set and before you can do it a bit. So you can basically get the tank into the ground, backfill gravel, and that's part of the project done. The other option would be concrete, which we would generally recommend a lean dry mix. This just with wet mixes generally you get a little bit of flotation, so it's a little bit hairy. You've also got to allow that concrete to go off, so it kind of slows the project down quite a bit. So lean into a lean dry mix where you can. We would choose a concrete backfill if we've got very bad soil conditions. So if you've got very high clayey content within soil, clay content within soil, we would look at having a concrete around the tank. Generally, we would look at working room around the tank of anything from 250 to 500 mil, depending on whether you're talking about a platen tank or a rain or a carrot tank. But yeah, you need to be sensible about the excavation size, so you're not using crazy amounts of backfill. So if you did need further advice in terms of the availability of a certain backfill material within your area, just give us a shout and we can recommend based on what the suppliers are offering you. But yeah, if we can go with stone, that's by far the better option. But yeah, if you're struggling with the ground conditions or the availability of the stone, concrete is absolutely fine as well.
Perfect. We have another question that's come in. What happens if I have a high groundwater in my area?
Okay.
High groundwater level, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be.
Okay, yeah, so high groundwater level. This is obviously something which you may come across in certain areas of the country. You may start digging, excavating for your tank to go in, and when you hit a certain level, you may start finding water appearing in the bottom of your excavation. Now, with groundwater, we have a couple of options available to us. If I firstly talk about the platen tank, which is our flat style tank, the tank is actually possible to submerge it to the ground up to the top of the tank, and it's still groundwater stable. Now, you do need to, of course, have some water within the tank whilst you're doing the installation to hold it in place. And it only becomes groundwater stable when you've got that final finish level back up to ground level. So that's something to bear in mind. If you were, of course, to put the tank in the ground, even if you partially fill it with water and then leave it overnight and you get a sudden downpour, as soon as that, there is going to be flotation within that tank still. So if you get a lot of water coming into that excavation, it will lift the tank up. So that's something to bear in mind. I have heard it happen a few times since working here. That's just a small note. So yeah, that's my initial point with the platen tank. If you're referring to the carrot tank, which is our more spherical tank, you may be able to see it on the table, which is the tank on the, I suppose, the left-hand side of your screen. We basically say the tank is actually stable in groundwater up to the halfway point. So if the water level does exceed that, we would need to look at some sort of way to strap that tank down. We could look at potentially having a slab with some straps over the top of the tank, or again, you could refer to looking at the concrete backfill. How, of course, do you then put concrete into a wet excavation? Then that is quite a tricky task, I can understand. That being the case, you'd need to drop a pump, of course, into the bottom of that excavation and pump that water away, get away from whilst you're doing the groundwork stage. And yeah, hopefully then once you've done that, the tank's in the ground and it's ready to go for when you do the other connections inside the tank. The one final comment I think I want to make on that is that if you do refer to the graph installation instructions in a bit more detail, you may notice that there's a method of installation in high groundwater, which is putting a perforated pipe around the bottom of the excavation. The idea of that, of course, is that the water channels into that perforated pipe and it's channeled away. That's quite a good solution if you're installing the tank into a slope or an embankment, so the water can, of course, channel away via gravity. There is a step up from that, of course, which you implement an electronic pump into a chamber. So with the additional electric supply, it's not a great all-round solution, but is also a possibility. So it might be something that might be applicable in some installations and applications.
Perfect. That answers that one. And we have another question. How do I know if my water outlet has a mains water or rainwater connection?
Okay. This is something which we touch on in the CPD a bit. Officially speaking, if it's rainwater, it should very much be labelled as a rainwater outlet point. Rainwater is typically labelled with black and green colours. If we're referring to an underground pipe, for example, it's certainly going to be a black pipe with a green stripe. If it is, say, an outside tap on the side of a building, you very much should have a plaque saying that that is a non-possible drinking water source, i.e. it's rainwater. And again, that would be typically be green with black text on it. That's the same, of course, if it's coming back into the property. So it's just something to bear in mind. Excuse me, drinking too much of this coffee. But yeah, if you're looking at a rainwater outlet point, there are, of course, readily available labels and markers that you can acquire to say that this is a rainwater outlet source to potentially stop any accidental consumption of that rainwater by a human being. So it's just something to bear in mind. Most mains water tap outlet connections, I'm sure if you go to the side of your property, you would notice that there's no labelling whatsoever. So that's just something to bear in mind. If it's not labelled, probably going to be mains water, but you should always probably check with the owner or the building authority that's built the property what is mains and what is not. So just something to bear in mind.
And when it comes to ordering the rainwater harvest system, there will be a set of stickers or plaques that come with it, so you can label the outlets at that time to make sure people know they are mains water and rainwater.
Yes, it's something that you should speak to the manufacturer about. If you don't receive some sort of label identification kit and you are going to go into an outside tap, do get in touch with the manufacturer. They're relatively cheap and availability is next day delivery via postal company. So yeah, something important to take into account, especially if you've got children living at the property as well.
Perfect. And I think that's all the questions that have come in during the live stream. And I think that is it for today's Rainwater Research Live. So I want to say a big thank you for those who took the time out of their day to come watch us and listen to us talk about all things rainwater harvesting. And a big thank you for David for joining us and taking time out of your day. Yes, so I think that is everything. Like I said, thank you once again for taking part and joining us. And we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, take care. Goodbye.